Hello and welcome to our talk, Research Data Management and Research Data Management Training at GESIS. We are happy that you're here. And first we want to introduce ourselves. My name is Anja. I'm at GESIS since 2012, and since 2016 I'm active in research data management. I consult research projects on research data management and research data sharing, and together with Sebastian I provide trainings on research data management. I also do research, mainly also on data management, for example, the motivation to share data, what effort it means to do research data management properly and to share data, and on data protection.
Hi everyone, my name is Sebastian. I'm a staff member of GESIS, Leibniz Institute for the Social Sciences since 2006. And since 2009, I'm actively involved in research data management in different roles and positions here at GESIS, but it was always part of my job to provide consultings on research data management and its various topics, as well as to design and deliver training and training materials. My background is in social sciences indeed, whereas my research interests are in data management. So for example, in harmonization and standardization of data management activities across disciplines, as well as in the efforts and expenses to do good data management. So that is me, and that means, Anja, it's back to you again.
We both come from the department Data Services for the Social Sciences. We are located in Cologne, and we host the Data Archive, where we have more than 7,000 social science studies available for researchers and for the general public. We grant access to studies like the European Value Survey, the ALBUS, the ISSP, that's the International Social Survey Program, and PIAC, the International Assessment of Adult Competencies, just to name a few big ones, but we have many more data available. We receive mainly quantitative data from research projects and make them available for reuse, and to ensure that the data is of good quality in general, and also consequently the data that is coming to us and to our archive, we decided a while ago that we introduce research data management training to our portfolio. And Sebastian will give you an introduction to research data management now.
Thank you. Okay, then let's talk a bit about research data management in the social sciences and what it means. An extremely broad definition of research data management states that it contains all strategies, measures, and processes to ensure, first of all, data quality, for example, regarding the storage of data in a research project, or ensuring the interpretability of research data and research findings. Moreover, research data management fosters the usability of data within the research project of origin, as well as the reusability beyond the research project of origin in terms of data sharing, so enabling others to continue working with these data. And in this context, of course, research data management also ensures replicability of research findings, so reproducibility of these findings, making use of the data as it is required, for example, by the rules of good scientific practices. So in other words, whenever we deal with research data, we are doing research data management, containing, for example, the process of study planning or data collection, measures to clean, document, and analyze data, the organization of data across the research project, but also data sharing and preservation of materials beyond the research project of origin. And in regard to social sciences, research data management also considers legal issues, for example, in the context of data protection regulations or intellectual property rights on research data and related materials. So in short, research data management encompasses the whole data lifecycle. The data lifecycle visualizes the lifetime of research data. And in comparison to biological life, it's not just a lifespan, because it also expects that there is data sharing at the end and the opportunity to make use of data in further or future projects. So it is a cycle indeed, implying data sharing and reusability. There are different illustrations of the data lifecycle available out there, This is a quite simple illustration with only 5 steps in there, and it starts with research itself. So this is the moment when researchers come up with a research idea, they start defining their research questions, and in this context, they also start defining the research population of interest, as well as the information needed about these population to provide an answer to the research questions. With some good luck, research data exists already that can be reused in the current research project. But if that's not the case, well, then researchers have to do study planning, which means they have to concretize the research population of interest. They have to develop a measurement instrument, for example, in terms of a questionnaire. And they also have to define the sample drawing to collect data in the next step of the data lifecycle. So data collection and data processing or data cleaning is the third step in the data lifecycle, which just simply means that data need to be collected first, of course. Maybe they need to be digitalized, data metrics need to be set up, and data need to be checked and cleaned, for example, to add further information to the data. And then we're up to the fourth step. That is the step researchers are most interested in, doing data analysis, so make use of the data collected and hopefully get reliable results on the research questions that can be published in a hopefully highly ranked academic journal. According to the rules of good scientific practices, researchers have to ensure replicability of their research findings for another 10 to 15 years once these findings are published. And replication of research findings also implies reusability of research data in the future. And the best way to ensure reusable data is to archive these data in a data repository and share it with others. So that implies, first of all, to identify a suitable repository, and then, of course, to archive data and related materials there, enabling others to continue working with it. Each step of the data lifecycle implies particular measures of research data management. So let's start again with research itself. When researchers come up with the research idea, defining the research questions, the research population of interest, and of course the information needed, it's time to consider a first ethical review. So taking into account the risk for the research population, as well as for further groups being involved in the research project, for example, colleagues in the team, reviewers, supervisors, and so on. And this first ethical review should also consider the research design and how it minimizes the risk for the different groups involved in the research project. Likewise, when searching for usable data, researchers should document the search as well as their findings, and they should recap the added value of data newly gathered. This will help at the end to identify a suitable repository for these new data and how these new data fit into the existing landscape. If no reusable data exists, well, as mentioned already, then of course researchers have to do study planning, and that means first of all to consider further ethical aspects, for example, to obtain an ethic vote. Likewise, doing study planning also implies to do some documentation, for example, how the research population was defined and how the sample was drawn, but also on the development of the measurement instrument and its pre-testing. In case of processing so-called personal information, researchers have to be aware of data protection regulations, such as the General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union, and identify or define and implement measures to protect personal data when collecting these data in the field, as well as when processing the data in the research project. To process personal information, we need a legal base, and in research, that's in general the so-called informed consent. So in the phase of study planning, it's also time to develop a consent form and to implement consent management to ensure the management of rights by participants later on. No matter if we're going to collect personal information or not, researchers should be aware of copyrights and the rights of usage, within the project, as well as beyond the project of origin. So once again, taking data sharing into account. And this is a key issue in collaborative research projects where it really needs to be defined which members of the research project have the right to access the data, to work with the data, and so on. And then finally, in study planning, it's the latest point in time to also define guidelines for storing, naming, versioning, and bagging up data and related materials to systematically organize such materials in the research project. Based on study planning, researchers can then do data collection, which first of all means to obtain informed consent and to implement a consent management. And then, of course, to collect the data, to receive the data, to store and preserve them securely at the institute of the researchers. Moreover, doing data collection, it's time to document data, the data collection and the field period, for example, in terms of a methodological report that contains information on the project itself and its research purposes of origin, the measurement instrument and its pre-testing, the research population, the sample drawn and realized in the field, so also including information on dropouts. The field period itself is part of the methodological report, and any anomaly occurring in the field period that might potentially affect data and data quality. And then, of course, the methodological report should also say something about the findings on data checks, on data harmonization, on data manipulation or changes made to the data, for example, in the context of pseudonymization. Likewise, if derived variables are constructed like weights, indices, or scales, this should be part of the methodological report. And finally, this report should also provide information on legal issues, for example, on obtaining informed consent or receiving an ethical vote. For quantitative social science data, there should be a codebook in addition that describes the structure of the data matrix, as well as the meaning of the single variables in the data and how these variables relate to the underlying measurement instrument of origin. So what are the questions for each variable? And in addition, of course, what do the single codes in a variable mean, and how do these codes refer to the answer options provided in the questionnaire of origin? And then, of course, any material is useful in regard to data documentation that improves understandability and usability of the data in the future. For example, information on interviewers or on stimuli employed when collecting the data. Once researchers have well-cleaned and well-documented data in hand, well, they can do data analysis. And data analysis, first of all, implies to ensure that this analysis is in line with legal issues. So, for example, regarding the rights of usage defined in the project, or regarding the consent management. So here maybe as an example, we might think about someone who gave informed consent and agreed on processing the data, but later on this person restricts data processing and rejects making use of these data and data analysis. And if that's the case, researchers have to be aware of such observations, and they have to exclude the observations from the data set before analyzing it. Moreover, when doing data analysis, researchers should document. They should document further variables derived, for example, if they construct additional scales or weights, but they should also document the steps in data analysis. For example, by keeping the codes, preserving it, or even share it to ensure replicability of research findings in the future. And then, of course, in the process of data analysis, additional findings should be documented that are not published so far. For a lot of researchers, this is indeed the end of the data lifecycle. So data get lost on researchers' hard drives, on institutional servers, or even worse, in the cloud, neither enabling replicability of research findings nor ensuring reusability by others beyond the research project of origin. And as mentioned already, the best way to ensure replicability and reusability of research data is to archive these data in a data repository. And once again, this first of all implies to identify and choose a suitable repository for fair data sharing. And here, researchers can make use of the documentation created in the first step of the data lifecycle. So when searching for reusable data and recapping how new data fit into the existing landscape. In regard to data sharing, researchers first of all have to consider legal issues once again, making sure they have consent for data sharing, as well as the permission by all copyright holders to archive and share data and related materials. Next, data must be prepared for sharing. That implies to decide on which materials to share, in which file format, but also to ensure that data documentation really enables reuse so that it really fosters understandability and interpretability of the research data. And then, of course, research data must be submitted to a data repository. And in this context, researchers should be prepared for a revise and resubmit slope, as we all know well from academic journals. So it might happen that, for example, documentation is not sufficient enough to understand the data, or the data are only weakly pseudonymized. And at that moment, staff members of the repository will not make changes to the data or the documentation, but they will get back to the researchers that submitted the data in origin and ask them to do some revisions. And that implies for the researchers to plan in some time to do such revisions. Once the data are accepted for archiving and sharing, researchers will receive a citation that in general includes a persistent identifier, like a digital object identifier. And of course, researchers should make use of this citation in their own publications. So coming back to the data lifecycle, it becomes obvious that first of all, research data management is an early task that starts right away with the research idea and the definition of research questions, research population, and the information needed. So there it is time for a first ethical review. It's time to start data documentation, but it's also time to think about data sharing already. Second, research data management must be realized continuously over the whole data lifecycle. Systematically planned and continuously conducted data management ensures usability of the data within the project, as well as reusability of the data, no matter if it's for the purpose of replication or if it's for the reuse in new research contexts. And then finally, to ensure and improve fair data sharing, researchers should rely on the existing infrastructure in terms of data repositories that keep data fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable in the long run. So with this overview, we have reached the end of the talk on data management already. But before getting to the Q&A session, there are some final remarks Anja will summarize now.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So with our service, the RDM-Training, we want to transfer our knowledge that we gain in our work at the data archive to other researchers and to staff in research projects. That way we want to improve data quality, make it reusable for others, and also foster the idea of open science and open data in the research community. We have a homepage and we make a lot of information available there. We mainly link to other resources because there are already great resources out there. And if you got interested by our talk today, we highly recommend and we link to the CESTA guide on research data management in the social sciences. It's a very extensive and easy to understand guide, and we highly recommend you consult that one when you plan your research project. On our homepage, you also find information about our trainings and how to request them for your institution or for your group. And we are also available for consultation if you have specific questions about your own project. You can reach us at rdm@gesis.org. That's on the next slide. Thank you. And on our last slide, we just have the announcement of our last talk from our department, the Data Services Department, that will be on the Secure Data Center and how you get access to very sensitive data that is stored at GESIS, data that cannot be shared freely. We already had a couple of talks about our department and its services, and if you're interested, you can watch and listen to them on the YouTube channel. Thank you very much, and we look forward to questions.